I had a woman who would come and clean my house a couple of times a month, and she'd come over one morning, and she was trying to figure out what was wrong with me, honestly, because I'd been married for 7 years, I'm Latina, no kids, so she was like, well, you seem like a very nice woman, but obviously this all adds up to that there's some, you know, monster lurking within. So that morning when she came to clean my house, she asked, you know, Mrs. Sonia, ¿cuándo va a tener un baby? When are you going to have a child? I didn't want to answer her, so I redirected like any good journalist who doesn't want to answer a question. And I said, Carmen, what about you? Are you going to have more children? The only child that I knew of was this young boy who she would sometimes bring to clean. She told me, she just started crying, and she said, well, in Guatemala, where she was from, she was a single mother, 4 kids that I didn't know about. She had left behind in Guatemala because she couldn't feed these kids more than once or twice a day. And she told me that morning, I remember, that she hadn't seen her children in 12 years. And I just couldn't understand, how is that possible for a mother to leave her children, come to the US, and not know when or if she's going to ever see them again. She was traveling 2,000 miles away from her children. A year later, her son came up on his own to come find his mother. Like a lot of these children who are left behind in their home countries, Mexico and Central America, he wanted to know, you know, does my mother love me? She said she was going to return quickly, and she hasn't been able to. And he said, you know, I came up on this series of buses, but there are these thousands of children coming up on top of freight trains through Mexico to come and find mothers who left them behind in their home countries. And it just seemed like this incredible story to me of this modern day odyssey of what these children are willing to do to come and reach their mothers in the United States. There's a real change in who's coming to America. Before, it was overwhelmingly men, and there's been a real shift, and there are millions of single mothers who have come from Mexico and Central America and left children behind, and then those children come in search of them. So of the 11 million who are now in the United States without permission, more than half are women and children. I think it's significant because if you read the story, it really gives you a sense of what is driving people out of these countries, what's pushing them out. That's very important in terms of understanding immigration and what we can do about it. What are people willing to do to get through Mexico? I mean, when you see what I saw on top of these trains, people who faced gangsters who controlled the tops of the trains, bandits, corrupt cops. These migrants, these children I was with on top of the trains would lose arms and legs to the train. I mean, it's a very, very difficult journey, and you see that determination. I think that really shows us a lot about what will work on immigration and what won't. And I think in places like Long Island, you know, increasingly these women and children are your new neighbors, and I think it's important to understand who the neighbors are before you start to hate. So I think it's very important to take people inside one immigrant family. This is a very segregated society, a very segregated island. And I think unless you take people inside one immigrant family to try to understand some of those issues, we're not going to get anywhere on this issue and start to get along a little better. For Enrique's journey, I won many, many awards, more than a dozen national awards, including the Pulitzer-Prize for feature writing, the George Polk Award for international reporting, the Guillermo Martinez Marquez Award among Hispanic reporters. So it won virtually every national award in journalism.
What are you working on right now?
I am working on a book for Random House that looks at 5 of the largest social issues in the United States through 5 women who are taking on those issues. So I feel that sometimes with some of these huge social issues in the United States, and I've always written about social issues, that's my passion, they seem, you know, intractable, unsolvable, but I felt that if you took people inside each of these issues through the life of one woman and the work that she's doing, and women who are perhaps models for what can work around the country, it might make some of these issues seem less you know, problematic and more solvable to people around the country. So that was my goal in writing this book, and I've still got a couple more years to go. Aspiring writers, I would give advice that it's like anything else. It's my husband says that the work I do is 99% perspiration, and it's like anything else. I think writing is a lot of writing and rewriting. I rewrote Enrique's Journey, parts of it 12 times, so I think writing is hard work like anything else. And I think a lot of having that drive to do something like that, to write something 12 times, comes from getting a good feel for what you really want to write about, what you're passionate about. And I think then you're willing to, spend the time that it takes to be able to really craft a narrative. I think with writing, you're trying to write a story with a beginning, middle, and an end. You're trying to take people on a ride and into a world that they might not otherwise see. Grab them by the throat and take them on a ride so that you can educate them about issues as I do. So I think there are a lot of elements that make for good writing. You need great characters, you need a question that people want answered as they're reading a story. You need that narrative arc that I talked about. You need to do foreshadowing. So there's a lot of elements that you can use to shape a narrative to make it more compelling. But I think the first thing is just to have a great story and find a narrative thread to tell that story through. So for me, it was wanting to write about women who come here, leave children behind, and then that incredible journey that those children make to come and follow them. And I wanted to do that through one mom who leaves, in my case it's Lourdes, and then the boy who follows her 11 years later in search of his mother. So it's finding that narrative thread where you can really try to engage people in one person's story or one family's story to tell that story through. Well, in the fall, Enrique's Journey last fall was the second most chosen book on college campuses for freshman or all-campus reads, and so I traveled to a lot of campuses around the country, and sometimes I travel abroad to speak about this issue, and also to some high school campuses. So I had been to Bayshore High School previously a few years ago, and now I'm back in Long Island talking about this again. So I'll spend a little over 2 months traveling around the country. Last week I was in Omaha, Nebraska. I was in Kansas City. I was in the middle of Pennsylvania, Millersville, Pennsylvania, and I'll be going on to Elon, North Carolina, and then Boston, New York, and Cincinnati before I head home in a couple of weeks. So a lot of travel. Immigrants used to come to 6 states, and over the last 20 years they've dispersed to most of the states in the Union. And so as a lot of people have shown up to places like Long Island, like North Carolina, like Arizona, people who look like me, who speak a different language, have different culture and customs, when there's a sudden surge of people who are different than what we're used to, our first tendency is to freak out. And so I think many colleges around the country are assigning my book as a way of having students at least start to understand immigrants a little better. And I'm traveling to a lot of those places to speak about these issues. Winning the Pulitzer is amazing, and especially winning it for writing about Latinos. I write throughout my career I've written about social justice issues, and I write about women and children and the poor and Latinos, people who don't get enough ink. And so to win for writing about Latinos and an immigrant experience was really meaningful to me. I'm the child of immigrants. I've always felt somewhat, I was born in this country, but I've always felt somewhat like I had a foot in 2 worlds. My parents are from Argentina, so my best friend down the block in Kansas growing up was from Greece. So I always identified somewhat with immigrants, and so winning for that was great. And also, when you win the Pulitzer Prize, people actually listen to what you have to say about a given issue, which is pretty great as well. So it's been wonderful.